Kruipen aimed at a polar bear, not only missed, but managed to get its attention. Several people backed away in fright, but the polar bear didn't seem to catch up. They stepped forward to have a look and found that the polar bear had fallen in the snow. When they were confused, Federico found that the food eaten by the polar bear was the corpse of an ancient mammoth. They brought the polar bear back to the experimental base, and Kruipen also called his daughter Anne, telling Anne to come to the laboratory as soon as possible. But just after hanging up the phone, the polar bear died strangely. After research, they found that mammoths were the culprit. So, Kruipen called Leacock and asked Leacock to stop Anne from letting them come, but Leacock couldn't stop Anne at all. In desperation, Leacock sent them to the experimental base, but when they came to the house, they found that there was no one there, and it was still full of unpleasant smells. Several people searched the laboratory, but only found a dead polar bear. Leacock also leaned on the polar bear to take pictures. Leacock seemed to be bitten on the arm by something. They naively thought it was fleas, so they didn't take it to heart. The polar bear ate the carcass of the mammoth and died of an ancient virus. This virus will parasitize on humans or animals, and then reproduce and lay eggs rapidly. 2 of Kruipen's assistants have been infected with the virus, while the male assistant is dead, and another female assistant, Mary, is dying. Anne called on the walkie-talkie, and Mary heard Anne's voice. "Didn't she tell you not to come?" Mary found Kruipen with the walkie-talkie and learned that her daughter had come to the experimental base. Kruipen didn't say much, just told his daughter not to leave the experiment base. In the face of Mary's questioning, Kruipen did not explain. Kruipen chatted with Peter, seeming to be planning something. Mary noticed something strange, and Mary took the gun and killed Kruipen and Peter. Early the next morning, Anne saw someone driving towards the experimental base. When Anne went out to check, Anne found that there was no one in the car. Anne found Mary in the helicopter. Mary was dying on the hospital bed. Mary kept saying sorry. Not long after, Mary died at the same time. Leacock's arm began to deteriorate, and the place where he was bitten was extremely itchy, and Stephen was bitten all over his body with injuries. Everyone started to panic, but when they were about to leave, they found that the helicopter had been tampered with. That's obviously what Mary did, and Mary wanted to keep everyone here. Anne was worried about her father's safety, so she drove to the field base where her father worked. When she opened the tent, she only found the corpse of an ancient mammoth. It is now certain that Mary was infected with this virus and died. Anne wanted to find her father quickly, but unexpectedly found the dead Peter outside the tent. There is also a buried body not far away. Anne thought it was her father, and Anne desperately wanted to push the dirt away, but Alan stopped him immediately and took Anne back to the experiment base. "Although I am very worried about my father's safety, I must make sure of one thing now." Anne lifted Mary's clothes, and Mary was indeed infected. In order to prevent the spread of the virus, they moved the corpse to the laboratory for isolation. Polar bear carcasses are also quarantined. This time, Kyle contacted the rescue team, but Anne didn't think so. He thought he should contact the CDC, and the place must be quarantined. If the virus is brought back, the consequences will be disastrous. Kyle disagreed. Just as Anne was about to contact the CDC, Kyle destroyed the radio because Kyle was also infected. At this time, the virus has hatched and turned into a bug of size. Seeing this horrible scene, Leacock was frightened. With the help of his companions, Leacock's arm was chopped off. Leacock fell into a coma due to blood loss. When Anne was looking for the first aid kit, she accidentally discovered the diary and videotape left by her father. It is recorded in the diary that this unknown creature is an ancient vertebrate, and it only hurts after being bitten. After the bite, eggs will be laid in the wound, and once the eggs hatch, the host will die. To learn more, Anne intends to check the videotape, but the camera is on Mary's body. Anne put on a protective suit and walked into the laboratory. Although she got the camera, she was covered in bugs. Anne hurried out of the laboratory and took off her clothes. At the critical moment, Alan pulled out the bug in time, but Kyle was still worried and asked to check Anne's whole body. Fortunately, Anne was fine. They were just about to play the video, but found bugs in the house. Several people walked to the laboratory to have a look. The carcass of a polar bear has been eroded by ancient creatures. The laboratory is full of bugs, and the creatures in the infected human body have hatched, and she keeps calling Kyle for help. Kyle brutally killed Stephen and lied that Stephen told him to do it.
You have them too.
Leacock also found that the infection in the arm was not under control. He knew he was going to die, so he went into the house. The rest of the people are ready to go to the helicopter. It must be confirmed whether someone is infected. Kyle started to panic. He threatened the two with a gun and hurried out. The two realized that Kyle has been infected. In order to survive, Kyle is ready to kill and silence. In the nick of time, a gunshot rang out and Kyle fell down. It turned out to be Kruipen. Anne was very happy to see her father alive. They are going to set fire to this place and leave, But when the two were pouring gasoline, and suddenly thought of something, he hurried to check his father's videotape. It turned out that all this was the father's conspiracy. He intentionally infected the ancient virus and planned to bring the virus back. The reason for doing this is because he has repeatedly called on the world to protect the environment and reduce carbon dioxide emissions, but no one has paid attention to it. The virus brought by the melting glaciers is a masterpiece of human beings. Only by spreading fear can people wake up. So he chose such an extreme method. When the two who learned the truth wanted to go out, they found that the door was locked by Kruipen. The rescue helicopter arrived at the base, and Kruipen boarded the plane. That's when the two broke out the window, and Kruipen said they were infected before the plane took off. Alan caught hold of the plane, but it didn't take long before he fell and died instantly, seeing her classmate die tragically before her eyes, and didn't care about the relationship between her father and daughter, and raised her gun and pulled the trigger continuously. The pilot was shot, the plane lost control instantly, and the plane was blown up along with the base. And took her father's diary and videotapes and wanted to go back to the city. Not long after, two helicopters appeared over the base. And somewhere in the city, a dog is nibbling on a bird, which is the one next to the polar bear. Disaster is about to strike again.